Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live stream where we're going to recap Greenfoot. Now, it ain't the most exciting program in the world, but it is what the assessment is about on tomorrow's lesson for some of you and on Thursday's lesson for some of you. So what I'm going to do is take a look at a past paper that I've written. And I wrote this last year for the current Year 12's Year 11 mocks. So it is broadly in line with what you'd expect from this kind of paper. And we're going to work through it together, just see how that works and see what you need to be able to do in the assessment time. And now if you've got any questions, please pop them in the comments. There are a few interesting emotes popping up, as you can see. I'll highlight any questions that we've got as we go. So if you do need to stop me, I've got the chat up on screen. So drop a comment in and we'll pop it up as we go. But for now, let's have a quick look. So I'll pop over here and I'll just move myself over here. So this is the past paper that I wrote. I think this is about a year old now. And the thing you have to remember is there's only one past paper for the specification that we work on. So all the other Greenfoot questions, great as they are not worth as many marks as we get. So what I did is I wrote this. It's a bit sarcastic in places, I apologize, but this is the sort of question that you might get on a paper of our style. So let's start with question 7. And question 7 is where we build something completely from scratch. So the idea there is that we're going to start a brand new Greenfoot file, and we're going to work on that. So let's start it here. A games developer would like a new scenario created using the Java programming languages within the Greenfoot environment. That's just a lengthy way of saying do it in Greenfoot. Now, please note, it's only worth 5 marks. It's a big chunk of stuff here, but it's only 5 marks. And all the skills you use here can be essentially copied and pasted into the final question, which is the more traditional one, the one we've done a few times before. So part A, create a new world called Graveyard. Set the background image within this world to a 10 by 10 grid using the image graves. Well, let's do that first of all. Now, I've got Greenfoot here. We may struggle to see it a little bit. I will zoom in as much as I can on the code, but there's not much I can do about the actual interface itself, unfortunately. But you'll also get given, you remember, a folder full of resources. In this case, the game demo resource and the images is everything I've got. And you'll see here I've got a bunch of images. I've got a beautiful ghost there. And can we even see that? It's very, very small. Beautiful ghost, some graves, a little skeleton, and a zombie. And do you know what? What I'm going to do is put the graves as the background. Now, the question says we need 10 by 10 grid. So what I need to do, I need to first of all go and create myself a new Greenfoot scenario. So I'm going to go to scenario. I'm going to go to new. And then it's going to ask me, hopefully, to give it a name. I'm just going to call it. It's trying to stick it within there for me a minute. I'm going to put it in my documents folder. And I'm going to call it the very, very wonderful. What did it want me to call it, actually? Let's just check. Game demo. So let's call it game demo. How wonderful. Now, of course, that's the most important thing to do because your file is actually named the way it needs to be named. And we've got a wonderful... It's a wonderful comment popping up there. Thank you. Thank you. Nice to have a small round of applause. So we've got that going off here. And hopefully, he says very confidently, it should have appeared somewhere on my screen. It doesn't seem to have done that. So, oh, here we go. Loading very, very slowly. I'm going to get this one out the way because this is an old one. And we'll open up our game demo. And the first thing we need to do is we need to create a new world. So we're going to right-click on the world. We're going to create a new subclass. And let's just check what they wanted it called. They wanted it called Graveyard. So if we go back there, we'll call it Graveyard. Oop. Then my inability to spell causes problems again. And now we need to then pick the image. Now, a few of you contacted me over the weekend to say that you were struggling with getting the image in. It is really straightforward, really. You click import from file, and then you go and hunt the image down. Now, the image is sat on my desktop. So hopefully, if I just drag this over here, there we go. It goes and finds that image. I'm going to double click on it, and you'll see it pops up here. I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to say compile on that for it to start building my graveyard for me. That'll take a second or so. And that's lovely, but that's not what I want because the question asks me for a 10 by 10 grid. So what I have to do is go in and pop just a single line of code in. I'm going to double click on the graveyard. to pull the code up for the graveyard here. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see this code. Now, this is going to be ridiculously large, but hopefully you'll be able to see it on the live stream. And it's this line here we need to change. The super line is the thing that creates the world. And you see there the comment, it says that 600 by 400, 1 pixel grid. Now, our image is 60 pixels wide, so we change that to 60, and then we change it to a 10 by 10 grid. Now, of course, 10 by 10 is just what this question has asked me. I'm going to click compile, and it says no syntax errors, so that's great. And I'm going to recompile this, and we should end up with, there we go, a 10 by 10 grid of images. So there's my first mark got, and all I'm really doing is bringing in an image and editing some code. I also now need to create a new class called skeleton and set the image of the class to skeleton.jpg and put 2 skeletons in there. Okay, well, I'm going to have to create a new actor subclass this time. So I'm right clicking on the actor. Now, the main difference is the actor is the thing that moves. And aside from the actor being a thing that moves, it's one of the objects, the things that actually do the jobs. The world is just the background. So we wanted, sorry, this was a skeleton. So I'm going to call it skeleton. Here we go. And I need an image. So I'm going to import from file. And I'm just going to drag my skeleton onto this left-hand side and it'll pick it for me. And then I can go, hopefully click on it there, click on OK. And that's done. Now what I'm going to do is click compile. That builds the skeleton. And then I need to add it into the world. And the way I do that is go new skeleton, drop it down, and it asks me for 2. So I need another one, right click new skeleton and drop it down there. Now, unfortunately, the contrast on this is not great, but you can see I've got 2 new things on there. Now, when we change the world, the important thing is to right click on the world somewhere and click save the world. See, it says file saved there at the bottom, and that means that is saved. Now, we do have a question here from Ben. Ben said, would it always be 60 pixels wide, the image? Yes, it will. There's nothing technically stopping the exam board from asking you a question with an image that's different from 60 pixels, but in every single past paper question, so the one for this spec and the one before, it's always been 60 pixels across. So that's always going to be the case. Also, another question which has just popped up. What lesson is it tomorrow? Well, that's a good question. Let me have a quick look on there. That's going to be last lesson tomorrow for 11C, and for 11D, it'll be a lesson 4 on Thursday. That's just a reminder, you've got time to revise and practice this if you want. Okay, so what's the next question that we need to have a look at? It is create a new class called zombie and add a code to it to allow it to move and turn at random. Okay, 2 zombies on there. So let's start off by making that zombie. So right click on the actor and make a new subclass. I'm going to call it zombie. I'm going to import my file. I'm going to take zombie from here and drag it onto that preview and then click on it. Now click compile just to make sure it's worked. I'm going to put in 2 zombies. And again, apologies for the contrast in this. I made this last year, not thinking I'd be using it on a live stream. With that done, I'm going to save the world. That saves my layout. So if I have to recompile, those zombies will come back. And then I'm going to go into my zombie code. So I'll double click on that there. And we're going to go into here and mess around with it. Another comment here. Sorry if I'm worrying you. It is tomorrow for the one class, Thursday for the other. So all my code for any of my actors needs to go in this class here called the act class. And you remember the thing I love about Java is the use of curly braces. And it's just saying anything that happens within these 2 curly braces here is what's going to happen every frame of the game. Now, you all know the sort of games you buy, the AAA games, they run at about 60 frames a second. Ours will run as many frames as our CPU can run at. So remember, this is random movement. So the first thing I'm going to have to do is create a variable that holds a random number. Now, please do have a look at your syntax guidance sheet that you'll be allowed during the assessment, because there's a few bits and pieces on there that you can use for this. And certainly I've got that open at the moment that I'm having a look at to refresh myself. But I need to make a number that is a random number between 0 and 4. Why? Well, I need to decide where I'm going up, down, left, or right. And the best way to do that is have a number between 0 and 4 that I can deal with. So the way we do that in Greenfoot is we say int, because it's a strictly typed language. And what that means is I need to say it's an integer. I'm going to call it random because why not? And then I'm going to use the random function, which is in Greenfoot dot, and don't forget the capital G there, get random number. And you remember that the syntax in Java is mostly a camel case with every word capitalized, which is quite handy to do. And then in this bracket, I need to say how many numbers I want to pick between. So I want to pick between 4. And now every line in Java, in Greenfoot, has a semicolon at the end, so you can make sure that's in there. And that's the bit that will generate the random number. When you finish the line, click compile just to check that you've done it right. And it's not angry with me there. The next thing I need to do is have my bunch of if statements. And shall we assume that if I pick 0, I mean to go up? So if, and again, I'm just having a quick look at the syntax sheet here, which you've got. So I'm going to say if random equals, that is if it is 0, then, and the way we do then is we put some curly braces in, and I always start and stop them and then go back into the middle to type into them. And what we need to do is set the rotation first of all. Remember, that's an angle. What we need to do is decide what angle our character is moving at. And this is a zombie. So our zombie is pointed this way. So I want to say that that is the way we're going. And to point in that direction, that is 0. Okay. So that means that to point up, to go up, I need to move 90, 180, 270. I hope. We'll try this out in a minute and check it's working. I then need to move him. Now, the easiest way I think to move him is to do this. It's just to do set location. And then it's got 2 parts. It's got a get X and a get Y. Again, this is all in your syntax sheet. You don't need to worry about that. But the thing is, you need to decide which one are we moving. The X-axis is from left to right. The Y-axis is from top to bottom. And so if we're moving up, I'm going to be adding to my Y-axis. And remember, the top left corner is 0, 0. So if I want to go up, I need to take 1 away from it. Okay. So I'm going to compile that and just check that works a minute. So if I click run, I should see, there we go. Both my zombies have pointed up and they've moved up as well. And the reason they're stuck there is because that's the only thing I'm dealing with at the moment. So I'm going to pause the game. Oh, sorry. Pause the game and go back into my code and finish this off. Let me just check the cats. Oh, well, asking for zombie with uppercase. Well, I know who that is. Yeah. What I'm trying to do, sorry, because I've got zombie lowercase, is the reason I've got zombie lowercase is because the question asks for it. Now, you need to be very careful here. If the question asks you for zombie lowercase, there's a reason for that. And so you need to make sure you translate that. As much as you might hate it, as much as it might, get on your nerves with capitalization and stuff, they do it for a reason, and we'll see that in a minute. Is a question here, which is what should be revised for this? Pretty much, you just need to make sure you can do the bits where you make something from scratch, you make it move at random, you make it move up, down, left, and right, and that you can make 2 objects collide and one disappears. And now, of course, if you can't do all of that, just do as much as you can. As well as that, sorry, the sound is what you need to make sure you have as well. So that's working there. And then it gets a little bit easier because then we can start copying it. So I've copied that, and I'm going to do else. And it's an else space if. That means that's the same as an elif in Python. If we do 1, that could be down. And in this case, if my zombie needs to move 90 degrees to point down, and I'm going to add 1 to the y-axis for that. I'm going to put another 1 in there. I'm going to do 2 now. Let's assume this is going to the left. That's going to be a 180-degree turn. And to go left, I need to take 1 away from the x-axis. By the way, if you're wondering where I'm getting all these turns from, all I've done is said the zombie's pointed right, so that's 0. And then if you imagine bearings in maths, so I'm going around in clockwise direction, I'm trying to work that out. Go back and have a look at my videos on YouTube, because I use a sort of a diagram that overlays on them to do that. Let's just check this last one. If it's 3, so we got 0, 1, 2, 3. I'm going to point him in 0 angle because he's in the right way, and I'm going to add 1 to him there. Okay, so let's compile that. Let's check I'm okay. Looks all right to me. Let's run it. Now, they are moving at random, but the question usually says they're moving at a reasonable speed. So I'm going to move it down a little bit until they are moving around on their own. And there we go. I got 2 characters moving at random. Okay, another question's popped up here. So the question is, the if random equals 0, can the number be any number, but the angle should be different? Well, the number is going to be 0, 1, 2, or 3, because I've said up here in my code, I've said that random is going to be a random number with a choice of 4. So it picks a random number from 4. Now, it always picks 0, 1, 2, or 3. So it's 0 index the random number. So you always have to go through this process. But if you're thinking, hold on, so we've been going for like 20 minutes, we've done 2 questions. That is true, but you'll find the rest of them become a little bit easier as you go. Because now we've got this, we can pretty much copy and paste a chunk of this for the next one. Now with that done, I'm just going to save just to make sure I've got that code, because I've done part C. So part D, a new class called Ghost. Allow the ghost to only move up and down. Oh, well, this is interesting, isn't it? This is a little bit different to what we've done before. Normally, they move completely randomly. So again, I'm going to do my new subclass there. I'm going to import from file, bring my ghost over and say, yep, call it ghost, bring it in. How many ghosts did it want? With a ghost. So a ghost means 1. I'm going to click compile there so it stops fussing. I'm going to put a new ghost in here. And then remember, I need to save the world. Otherwise, I lose where that ghost is every time it compiles. And I'm going to go into my code for my ghost. But actually, what I'm going to do is go into my code for my zombie. Because now I've written that big chunk there, I'm going to copy that. And that's going to form the basis of movement for everyone else I do. I'm going to paste that in here. And remembering this goes up, down, left, and right. Now, if my guy only goes up and down, then I only need the first 2. And I only need then to pick a number between 0 and 1, so 2. So I compile that there. And I run the game. Now my ghost, you see, is randomly going up and down. Only up and down, exactly as I got there. And this process is much easier now I've got a bit of code on there, because I'm going to be copying and pasting. Right, let's save that scenario. Save it, because that's the end of that question. Moving on to the next question. This is just one of those AR1 questions. We have to remember things. You'll have a question that's broadly similar to this. So open the Greenfoot World breakfast and familiarize yourself with the contents. From the Greenfoot World, identify examples of this. So this would have to be written in your answer document. So let's go back and let's have a look in the breakfast program. There it is. Now, remember, what we need to do is we need to open that up. So I'm just going to go to, getting excited, moving things around the screen too much. Going to Greenfoot, I'm going to open a scenario, and I'm going to just drag that over to there to make sure I open the right one. Here we go. And hopefully, oh, what have I done? I've broken something. Let me see if I can just make sure this opens with the right version. Sometimes my computer thinks it's okay to just open it in different versions of Greenfoot. So I'll just let that open a minute. But you on the computers in school, of course, can just double click on that and it will work absolutely fine with no problem at all. In fact, I'm just going to give it one more second. Here we go. So this is the breakfast scenario now. You notice I've left my other one open in the background because I'll come back to that in a minute. And what we've got a simple game here that we'll be developing in the next question. But this one says this, right? Give an identity of a superclass. Well, a superclass is anything that's inherited. So in our case, it's the world or the actor. Okay, they're the things that have got the arrows pointing up to them. They're superclasses. The rest of them in there are classes. So the next question says, oh, well, brilliant. Here's an example of a class. I could say kitchen, defib, counter, muesli, counter 2, Red Bull, Mr. Morgan. Any of those classes would work perfectly. A private property. All right, well, let's have a quick nose in here. There's bound to be a private property somewhere. Have a look in kitchen. And what we got? We've got all these things that start public, see? So it's not going to be one of those. So all we're going to do is double click on them. We're looking for the word private. A private property is a specific part. There's usually one on counter. If we look, here we go. Private. So that first word, public or private, just means can other classes see it? In this case, our private property is called total count. So we just write total count in that. Comment, well, comment is just a bit of text where we explain it. Now in Python, that was hashes, wasn't it? So in Java, you'll see this big chunk here. There's a big chunk here. Any of those things that are just different color and not part of the code are a comment. We've also got a method which is automatically run in each frame, and I've mentioned this to you already. On any character, if I go to the Mr. Morgan character here, it's the act method. The act method is the bit that's run for every frame, and that's the one you'd want to mention there. Now, that sort of question is reasonably low stakes if you can remember the stuff. It is pretty much just being able to point out examples of that code in a program that exists. And then this is your actual big program, and you remember that in yours, because this is based on a previous exam paper, and the exam paper they gave us has broken code in it, we can't get any further than part E. So that's as far as we're going to go today, okay? And you can see that this is one I made up just to have a bit of a laugh a couple of years ago, because you'll see in the game, it's me. And as you probably know about me, I do have, or I have had in the past, quite an unhealthy breakfast routine, which is a Red Bull to start the day off. Now, that's not good. So really, I should be after the Alpen. But you also see there's a defibrillator in case I do have a bit too much Red Bull and my heart stops. So that was the silly bit of a game there that we've got here. So what you'll need to do in your NEA, of course, is open a scenario that's already been created for you, and you'll have to adjust it. Ben's got a question here, which is, what does condone mean? I'm not sure where you've seen that, Ben, but condone usually means I will allow it. So presumably if you're looking at a mark scheme for something similar, it would be worded something like condone the use of this or this. It's basically saying it may not be perfectly right, but that's fine to include it. That's what condone means there. Right, so you see this question. This is your final question. This is the one that you're going to take a big run at. First thing to do is open this scenario. Luckily for us, it was the one we already had open, so we're there. And then it says, populate the world with a Mr. Morgan, a defib, and at least 2 Red Bulls and mueslis. Okay, so let's go to our world and do that. So we wanted 1 Mr. Morgan. So I'm right-clicking, 1 Mr. Morgan. There's my little face there. 1 defib. So I'm going to click defib, stick it on there. I'm going to go for 2 Red Bulls and 2 mueslis, isn't it? You can do more than that if you want to, but it's up to you. As long as you've got the minimums on there, you'll be absolutely fine. So I've got 1 Mr. Morgan, 2 Red Bulls, 2 mueslis, 1 defib now. And that's everything that I've got. So before you move on, the most important thing to get the marks for this one is right-click on a blank part of the world and say save the world. It says file saved, okay? If you don't do that, when I open this up on my computer, it won't show any of this stuff at all. It'll just be blank. And that means the first mark or 2, which are given for this question, you won't get. And they're by far the easiest. You'd be surprised how many people that can get all singing, all dancing Java code, but can't click that save button. So part B, edit the Red Bull and muesli so they turn and move around the world at random. Well, aren't we lucky? Because back in the one we just did, our zombie moved around at random. So let's copy that code and let's go back. And of course, this is perfectly fine because this is all code you've written in the controlled conditions. Let's go into our, which one was it? Sorry, it was Red Bull and muesli. So we'll go into our Red Bull. We'll go into the act method and paste. Compile. Looks good to me. Also in the muesli, we'll go in there, pop our code in, click compile. Looks good to me. I'll click run just to check that's working, and I'll slow them down because they are moving around pretty quickly, and that looks a bit good. If you're wondering how I slow it down, by the way, the speed slider, just bring it back over to the left and you'll be good there. Right, so I've got that. They turn and move at random. Let's save it. Let's save it to make sure that, so scenario, save. Do make sure you do this at the end of every question. The amount of times I've marked these and they've just been empty files or there's been very little done, despite the fact I've seen somebody spend hours on it in a lesson is incredible. Part C, edit Mr. Morgan so he moves when the arrow keys are pressed. So the main thing about this is we're going to take all our code we've just pasted for the random movement. I'm going to stick it in Mr. Morgan. Again, this gets quicker the further you go. Now, first of all, I don't need this random code on it because I don't care about whether I go randomly. I want to care about whether I press certain keys. Now, the code that's important for us is instead of if random, you do this. Greenfoot dot is key down. And where a lot of people go wrong here is they think this means the down key has been pressed on the keyboard. And that's not true at all. What is key down means that this has happened. Any key has been pressed down. But we need to say in the brackets here which key. The first key was up. So I think it's single quotes. Maybe it's double quotes because it's not quite put it in the right format for me. Sorry, it's double quotes. There we go. So I've got that line of code. That says what happens if I press up? Well, I'll do all the fuss for going up. The next one you remember was down. So I'll put down in there. The one after that was left. And the final one was right. Now, it's odd that I always remember it up, down, left, and right. I believe it was because as a child, I memorized the Konami code. And that, I'm sure, is up, down, left, right. Something, something, something. There we go. Anyway, all right. So we've got all that going there. And you can see I've done very little changes to this. It's the same if statement that I wrote right at the start of the assessment. And all I've done is just changed the notes here. And again, the syntax for this is in your syntax sheet. It's there for you. So it's just noticing where that syntax is, being able to update it and change it yourself, and bring it across. Now click compile just to make sure you haven't broken anything and you're good to go. Now, whilst I'm just waiting here, before I move on, one of the most common errors you get is if you forget to put a closing curly brace. Notice that entire chunk is now white instead of the smaller bit. Now, if you haven't got enough curly braces and you click compile, it'll say reached end of file while passing. Now, the easiest thing to do is just put another closing curly brace in, click compile, and hope for the best, and keep doing that. Now, unfortunately, in the assessment time, I'm not going to be able to help you debug that. You just have to try your best to solve it on your own. I'm sorry. Let's see if that works, though. So we'll click run, and I should be able to go down. There we go. Right, up, and left. There we go. Fantastic. So I can move me about. So that question is done. I can move on. Remember, it's only going to ease. So actually, you start moving through this reasonably fast as you go. Just check the chat. Ben says, "Isn't 90 right, sir?" It probably is, Ben. I think you've probably noticed there that with mine, because I've copied the angles of the zombie who was already pointed this way, wasn't he? He was already pointed this way. My picture of me, I'm just like this. So it might be a good idea to change those angles. It doesn't matter massively with this one because the face is straight on. It would matter a lot if they were pointed in a different direction because then it would look a bit strange as they were moving around. We can go and fix it if you want, but it's not really worth the fuss for this sort of session. The last question, sorry, the penultimate one, part D, and this is the one that's the fussy one. It's the collision. It's edit Mr. Morgan so he drinks a Red Bull when they collide. Now, the important thing is you always put the code on the thing that doesn't disappear. And this makes some sort of sense because why would you put the code on the thing that was about to disappear? Because the code would go with it. So let's get into the Mr. Morgan code. And we're going to go into the act method and just below the code we've just written for movement. Now, a big chunk of this next bit of code is in your syntax document. So go and have a look and see what you need to know and what you don't. Now, the first thing we need to do is that we need to introduce Mr. Morgan to the thing it's going to collide with. And the reason for this is because of object orientation, the objects don't really know that other objects exists. And the way we do that is we say actor with a capital A. And again, that's the name of the superclass there. And then we need the name of the subclass. So what I'm going to do there is go Red Bull, and be careful that your capitalization is identical. Now, semicolon. And again, if you want, just click compile after each line just to check that you haven't broken anything. And that's usually quite good. So the next thing is to say, all right, well, which Red Bull can am I talking about? Well, Red Bull equals, and this is one that's in your syntax, so it's there, but you just need to remember it because it's got a weird name, and it's get one object at offset. I've got a couple of arguments, this one, so we'll have a look at them in a second. But the key thing that we'll need to put in here is that we'll need to put in here, first of all, the X and Y coordinates. So it's going to be 0, 0. And the third thing is the class, is the actor's name and then dot class. So it's going to be Red Bull dot class. Now, again, you can go and watch my videos if you want to, or I break this down in more detail, but the basic explanation is this. This is looking to see, I am the Mr. Morgan object. What am I overlapping? How do I know I'm overlapping? 0, 0. It's in the same location as me. And how do I know what thing to get information about? Well, I want anything that's a Red Bull object. I want to find out that. So this entire bit on the right-hand side, what that's going to do, it's going to find an object, if I'm overlapping with it, and make that object this. And that means I can do something with it. And again, just compile, just check you haven't broken anything, and we're okay. Now, there's an important if here. If Red Bull is not equal to null. I'm putting both brackets in there because my compile will still work. Now, what does that mean? If we go back to our game, Mr. Morgan is currently not touching any Red Bull cans. So when this part fires off, it will say, well, I can't find a Red Bull can on top of me, anywhere near me. So null. Null means the absence of something, a blank. So it basically means I can't find anything. Sorry, what are you going to do about it? So what we're doing here is we're saying, right, well, if it's not null, if it's not nothing, then that means that we have actually touched a can of Red Bull. And if that's the case, we're going to move on and do something. Again, look at the syntax sheet, because all this stuff, bits and pieces of it are in the syntax sheet. You just need to know how to work that. Okay, now the next bit we need to do is we need to introduce us to the world, because the only way for me to remove the Red Bull, I can't do anything about it directly, is I need to talk to the world. I need to go up and talk to the world and get something going on there. So the way that happens is this, is we say kitchen. And why kitchen? Because it's the name of the world class over here on the right-hand side. So we say kitchen. Then we need to give it a name. Now you can call it whatever you want, but the way in which the exam board like it is they like us to reuse that, but all in lowercase. Now, that is why they give you distinctions between class names with capitals and smaller letters, because it allows us to muck about with this a little bit. So a kitchen called kitchen with a lowercase k is equal to, and then we're going to say kitchen again in brackets, get world. Now, often people think that there's something missing here. There's something missing from that part. And if we compile it, you'll see that it's not. And it's because what's happening is that I'm saying, right, there's a kitchen called kitchen, which is not confusing at all, is it? But what it is, it's the world I'm currently in. And this bit here is just a way of us saying, and the type of world is a kitchen. It's a very complicated way of saying, look, find the world I'm in and just make it a variable so I can talk to something. But there you go. It's Greenfoot. It's not the most robust games development programming language in the world. The next thing now is going to put the world name in, so lowercase kitchen. I'm going to say, oi, get rid of this Red Bull. So we're going to go remove object, and in brackets then we're going to put Red bull. Semicolon, end the line. And you notice the way I was doing that? I'm just doing a line of code. I'm compiling. I'm checking nothing's weird or broken. The worst thing you can possibly do is try and memorize this stuff, dump it all into a file, click compile, it errors, and then you just don't know why. Anyway, we've got that done there. Let's close that up and let's run it, see if it works. Now, if I go up, down, left, and right, if I bump into a Red Bull can, hopefully, there we go. Notice they've both disappeared in my game because it's done exactly as I said. Now, when I reset it, it uses the saved world options to bring things back up. I'm going to save that because that bit is done. And the final one is part E. That's the last one you're going to have to do in yours because when they produced the code for the exam paper that you'll be sitting, what happened was they did it in the wrong version of Greenfoot, and the remainder of them didn't work. So the last thing that you'll have to do is play a sound. Now, the first thing is a lot of people say, well, how do I know where the sound is? Well, the sound is in the folder here, shockingly in a folder called sounds, and is usually a file called pop.wav, which doesn't appear to be in there. So what I'm going to do, which you will not have to do tomorrow, by the way, this is silly because I've been a muppet here. And do you know, I've just realized I gave this as a mock to my poor old year 12s. They've sat this and there was no sound file in it. So the poor people, right, let me bring that over here. So you will have pop.wav in that folder, 100%. You will have it there because the exam board have provided me with a folder. It's not just me making things up. But I've got pop.wav in there. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to jump into here. I'm going to go into my Mr. Morgan code, sorry. And I'm going to add just one line of code that tells it to play. And it's very, very simple. It's going to go in these curly braces. Now, it needs to go inside those curly braces because as well as telling the Red Bull to disappear, I'm also going to tell the sound to play. Now, this is one of those things where you could just memorize this line of code if you want to, but have a look at the syntax. In the syntax file, it is broadly the same. You're saying, oi, Greenfoot, play a sound called pop.wav. And again, compile it, should be okay. And when we run it, if I pick up a Red Bull, I should hear a lovely little pop sound. Lovely there. I'm getting a crash here because I haven't set it up in my sound card, apparently. That's a very 90s issue. Now, the reason I've got that error set up, by the way, is because your computer will behave like that unless you've got headphones plugged in. So make sure you save it before you run it. Make sure you've got headphones plugged in before you add the sound. Hopefully, you'll all get there. Now, with that saved, I've completed all the questions I need to. My saved world should be called breakfast as it is. The only issue I have now is these two files I need to submit. And that takes a bit of time in itself. We should have plenty of time in the lesson to be able to do this. There shouldn't be any mucking around. We should be able to do this quite easily. But what I'm going to be asking you to do is to take your folders here, because what this actually makes is this makes a folder called this one makes a folder called game demo, which you'll have in your end drive. This will save over the top of the original file, breakfast in this case. And what I'm going to ask you to do is zip that up and upload it to me on Google Classroom so I can download it and mark it that evening. It should be a reasonable, straightforward one, hopefully. And I'd hope that we all do pretty well in it. But what I would suggest you do is go and practice as much as you can all of your revision techniques. If you want tonight, if you want to go and practice it, I would probably do something like go to my website and go to the Greenfoot page, because if I get that up here, if you go to lessonhacker.com/Greenfoot, you'll see all my Greenfoot resources. Now, once it loads, now as well as the tutorials, you can of course download the zip files then with everything in it, and especially I would say the Ocean's 11 example workthrough. That they will give you the zip file of the scenario files. You can follow along if you want to, but really what you need to do is try and play this about 2 or 3 times, try and work through it, and please do use the syntax file that I've uploaded to your Google Classroom just to see what is and what isn't going to be in the file that you will have access to in the assessment. So you will have access to this PDF file, which shows the syntax of the commands that you want to be using, and you should be good to go there. So have a look at that, use that in your revision. Right, well, that was reasonably quick for me to get that done, but I think we're in a good position there. The sun has set. Luckily, I've got my single LED light lighting up the middle of my big bald face, so you can still see what I'm doing. But what I would like to do is just ask you if there are any more questions before I stop. So if you do have any questions about the assessment on Greenfoot, please pop it in the chat. Otherwise, go get the Greenfoot installer from your Google Classroom, go to classwork, go to practical, scroll to the bottom, click load more, and you'll see some wonderful things at the bottom there. All the installers for Windows and Mac. Of course, if you haven't got that, it's very difficult to practice, but the important bit is, can you apply those skills? You'll have 40 minutes for this tomorrow. You shouldn't really need 40 minutes, but it will be there. Again, I am just waiting to see if we've got any questions coming up in the chat. We've had a visit from somebody I knew at a previous school. So hello, Nick. Hope you're all right there. I can't see any comments or any questions coming in, so I am going to put the stream to an end now. If you do have anything, please drop me an email, and I shall try and have a look tonight. But aside from that, hopefully you've done enough revision. This is going to be straightforward, and those marks tomorrow are not going to be wasted. At the very least, if you can't do everything, do part of it. You should be able to create a new world for me. If you can try and get the hang of the random movements, you can do that entire first question. If you can try and point out which bits and pieces are where and what they, which is a superclass and a class and all those sort of key terms that was in the first video on my YouTube channel, have a look there, because those key terms, those technical terms, will be asked about, and it's not going to be the same ones that are in the example question I've given you tonight, because again, that's a past paper that I wrote. And then the big question is mainly going to be a bunch of copy and pasting, really. It's going to be open an existing file and work. So a quick question here: do I know which class is doing which tomorrow? Luckily for you, I do. So tomorrow, 11C, you are doing the Greenfoot assessment last thing. And 11D, you've got your on Thursday's lesson, which is lesson 4, you will have your algorithms question, which again, you remember, is writing algorithms in almost Python, but they don't have to work. That's the important part about that one. And then on Thursday, lesson 4, you'll have your Greenfoot session. Now, given the fact that we've got all day until the Greenfoot assessments tomorrow and a couple of days until the other group, if you do want to come and have a chat to me, if you do want to see something in person, please come grab me tomorrow. I'd be happy to do something in like lunch or break or something if you just want to go through it again. Or if you just want to come in to me at lunchtime or at break time, you're welcome to come in and use the computers just to practice that. I'll make sure there are plenty of resources available to you. Right, well, thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in tonight. Hopefully, at some point, we'll get my numbers up enough that you can have custom emotes, because I know that was a much requested thing. But otherwise, I shall see you all tomorrow. Hope you have a good night's sleep, and make sure you're ready to go and you're all G'd up for getting that Greenfoot question absolutely smashed. Thanks, guys. Bye.